Ms. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Muhammad Ali, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies. Recently, Nuclear Threat Initiative, a leading think tank based in the United States, recently released its latest Nuclear Security Index 2020. It has received wide international, regional, and national coverage in the media and has been read with a lot of attention. So we are joined today by Ms. Samantha from Nuclear Threat Initiative, and we'd like to ask her a few questions about NTI itself, its index, how it is made, and also how it views Pakistan's nuclear security. So Samantha, thank you so much for sparing time and joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on this program, and I look forward to having a great conversation with you and for the listeners to tune in.
Thank you so much. So tell us first off, what do you guys do at NTI?
So NTI was founded in 2001 by former Senator Sam Nunn, who was a senator from Georgia and is famous for his program, the Nunn-Lugar program, which had a mission to secure and dismantle nuke, chem, bioweapons around the world, working primarily with Russia in the former Soviet Union. He and Ted Turner, who founded CNN, decided to build and launch NTI in 2001 with the mission of preventing attacks using WMD, nuclear, bio, and chemical. We've expanded the focus of our mission to include biosecurity, cybersecurity, and radiological security. And what we do is work with a variety of people from governments around the world, experts, academics, technical experts, to identify ways to reduce WMD threats and do so and propose actions that governments can take to reduce these threats. We are private, nonpartisan, receive funding primarily from foundations, although we do receive some government grants for specific projects. But we pride ourselves on being able to partner with organizations around the world and working closely with the governments to ensure we can get actionable progress on some of these areas.
Fantastic. That's a very elaborate scope of work and very interesting subject. Tell us something about the NTI Nuclear Security Index specifically. Why was it developed, and what were you guys thinking when you developed it, that how it would contribute to nuclear security?
So we started developing the first index, which actually was released in 2012. We started developing it after the first Nuclear Security Summit. If you know this, many of your listeners might know this, but for those who don't, in 2009, President Obama, after being elected, publicly announced that he had this mission to secure nuclear materials around the world and wanted to gather leaders from around the world to have a more ambitious approach to this mission. He hosted the first Nuclear Security Summit in Washington in 2010. Around 50 governments participated. And the result of the summits, and they actually happened every 2 years until 2016, was countries making commitments and taking actions to strengthen nuclear security at home through updating regulations, even reducing and eliminating materials in some cases, but also strengthening global institutions and mechanisms that support strengthening security globally. So in 2010, the first summit happened, and it really was an important moment to raise attention, political attention on nuclear security in a way that really hadn't been done before. NTI saw this as an important moment, but felt that we needed to set some priorities for nuclear security. So there needed to be some way to say, these are the most important things that countries should do. And then also to look at how to assess how countries were doing on actually implementing those commitments. We wanted to also track progress, and so that's why the index is released every couple of years, so we can see progress and trends over time. And then most importantly, wanted to identify areas where governments could take action to strengthen security at home and also globally. So the primary goal is to really drive and promote government action.
Tell us something about specifically regarding the Nuclear Security Index itself. How it is developed and what are the areas you guys look at, and how do you rate different factors in terms of judging the security environment of a country?
Yep. The first step is to identify what questions, what factors are important for nuclear security. So from the first index, we worked with an international panel of experts. So these are experts from around the world with different backgrounds, maybe former government, academics, NGO experts, a variety of different backgrounds. And they helped us develop what we call this framework. And the framework has different categories. And within those categories, you might call them topics, indicators, and then within that, a series of questions. And so once we establish the framework of questions, we then look at how to weight them. Some areas may be more important than others. And so in addition to establishing the set of questions, we also assign weights to them. And the international panel is very key in helping us to determine what those look like. The framework includes 5 areas. The first is looking at how much material, how many sites countries have, if they're increasing or decreasing their quantities. This is based on sort of the assumption that the more material there is, then more opportunities for theft. Again, these are all factors that we're looking at as related to security of nuclear materials against theft. The second category we look at is security and control measures, and that is looking at laws and regulations. What does a government actually require of nuclear operators? What are the measures that are required to be in place? Now, we don't look at specific facilities. We don't go and say this facility has this many armed guards or this type of control. It's really the national level requirements. The third area is global norms, and that looks at whether countries are showing commitment and contributing to the global architecture and institutions that help strengthen nuclear security globally. This looks at whether a country has ratified certain treaties, whether it's contributing to the IAEA or participating in IAEA activities like the Nuclear Security Guidance Committee, in a variety of areas. It also looks at how countries are taking actions to build confidence in the security of their materials and facilities. The nuclear terrorism threat doesn't have any borders, and so country can be concerned about its neighbor's security because materials stolen in one country could be used in an attack in another country. In addition, any kind of nuclear event anywhere in the world really impacts everybody because of the public perception of nuclear technology that could result in a reduced public confidence. So actions that help the public and other countries feel confident that a country is taking its security commitments seriously. The fourth category looks at whether the country is actually implementing those international obligations, treaty obligations, and whether it has capacity to do so through an independent regulator. And then the fifth area is called risk environment. And this is, it's sort of the most indirect area. And what it is, it looks at things like political stability, corruption, whether there's armed conflict, and also whether there are terrorist groups operating in or in the country or neighboring countries that could pose a threat. And this provides a little bit more context because these factors can impact a country's ability to secure materials and facilities. And so we do include those sort of contextual factors as well. And so this is the framework. The ranking that we kind of focus on is countries with materials. That's 22 countries. We do have an additional ranking of 47 that look at basically the same set of factors related to the risk of sabotage against nuclear facilities. And then we also do look at all of the countries that don't have materials to look at how they're supporting kind of the global architecture as well.
Fantastic. That's very comprehensive. Thank you, Samantha. Tell us and our viewers briefly, what are the biggest challenges to global nuclear security right now in your assessment? And when you look at the past 5 NTI indexes, what is the trend? Whether the challenges are increasing, being better managed, or declining? And what are the factors behind it?
Yeah. So what we've seen over the years of the index is a gradual, in some years actually quite large increases in score and performance. So a general upward trend in scores. We looked at median scores because that helps us look at those trend lines. And over time, between 2012 and 2018, also an increase in the number of countries improving, which is something we really care about, is what countries are doing to improve. However, since 2018, when the 4th index came out, we've seen, although scores still continuing on that upward trend, we've seen a huge drop in the number of countries making improvements, and also a huge drop in the average amount of improvement. And so you're seeing these sort of negative trends that are worrying. And you might ask, well, maybe countries are not improving as much anymore because they've done all that they need to do. But that's not the case. We do still see significant gaps in a few key areas. One area that has major gaps is insider threat prevention, which is a really important area. And how do you mitigate or prevent insiders, people who are authorized to be in facilities, from helping an outsider to steal materials or sabotage a facility? How do you identify those people and create a culture where suspicious activity can be reported? So that's an area that's very weak. Cybersecurity is also a very weak area. It's improved slightly over time, but still a large percentage of countries don't have requirements to secure facilities against cyber attacks. And then another area that's still weak is security culture. And this is really about, you can have all of the security cameras and the guards and all of these measures in place, but if the culture at a facility is one that doesn't prioritize security of materials, then you get the complacency and you ignore signs and you ignore alarms. And so having a strong security culture where every single person, from the CEO of a power company all the way down to the people who clean the facility, they all care about security and they are focused on it and committed to it, and committed to implementing it. So those are a few areas that are still weak. So this trend of countries that are no longer really improving to the extent they did, plus the fact that we still have all these gaps, plus the fact that the terrorist threat in the world is kind of more unpredictable and evolving, and we have cyber threats. These are trends that together kind of create this perfect storm, and they're very worrying. We think that this is likely because there's been less focus and attention, especially at a high level, on nuclear security since the summits ended, where there was this sort of unprecedented focus and a drive for action and a drive to improve because of the summits. And that there really hasn't been a similar event or driving force to get countries to focus. And there are other priorities. There are, pandemics, and there's economic issues, and countries have to face many difficult issues and crises. But the terrorist threat does not go away because there's a pandemic. So it's important to keep the eye on the ball and focus on this threat that is changing and evolving, and that actually can be prevented by country action if countries are willing to stay focused and committed and not be complacent about the threat.
Brilliant. Okay, Samantha, let's come to your assessment of Pakistan's nuclear security. Tell us, how did you find Pakistan's nuclear security, and why you think it has shown such remarkable improvement?
Yeah, Pakistan is one of the good stories in the index, in that it has continued to show commitment to improving, particularly in its regulations. And so in the report, we note that its improvements in at least this year's index, which were improvements of a score of 25 points in that category, security and control measures, is the second largest in that category in all of the different indexes. And if you look back at each index, Pakistan's score has every year improved in that area. So we see this commitment to improving regulations of nuclear security, which is something that's really important, because that's the kind of change that stays in place. So that's a really positive sign.
And you notice that, and you are also saying that the commitment towards nuclear security in terms of Pakistan is consistent as well.
Yes, every year there's been an improvement in this area. And it's important to note that the security and control measures that we're looking at, these are laws and regulations that apply to nuclear facilities like power plants and other kind of civilian materials and facilities. We're not looking at nuclear weapons issues. That's not part of what the index does. We don't look at non-proliferation or disarmament or arms control. We don't take any position on nuclear weapons possession or NPT status. We're really looking at the kind of civilian laws and regulations in place. But we really like to focus on where countries are improving and give credit, because it's so important that countries feel like they can, there's an incentive, they want to improve, they want to show their commitment. And Pakistan has done so. It also has several areas for improvement. And I would recommend anyone who wants to dig into this to go to the website, ntiindex.org. And on the country page, you can actually look at all the scores and scroll down and see the steps that each country can take to improve its score and by how much. In Pakistan's case, one area that it can improve is the insider threat prevention, which I mentioned. If it gets a full score for that indicator, its overall score would go up by 3 points. The same with cybersecurity, security culture. And an area that I think Pakistan might focus on, because I see that they're focused on updating the regulations, is in the global norms category. And the weakest areas for Pakistan here are more of these sort of confidence building and being more sort of open about what they're doing, having peer reviews, etc. Peer review is an important action that countries can take to help see where they can improve and learn from others. There's IAEA peer reviews, the International Physical Protection Advisory Service, or IPAS, that many countries, China has had one, the US has had one, to invite the IAEA and experts that a country approves of to come in and look at the regulations and perhaps visit a facility and provide suggestions, confidential suggestions about how to improve. And it's a really good mechanism for improving, sharing lessons learned, best practices, but also shows to the kind of the world this commitment to improvement. And so there are several areas where Pakistan can improve by quite a bit. This issue I just mentioned about confidence building, in that area, Pakistan could improve by 4 points if it gets a full score in all of the questions in that area. Another area which is included in that is being more open about quantities of materials. So We look at civilian materials. You know, many countries use various means to declare their overall quantities of materials, not where they are or the type, but sort of overall quantities. And then the UK and the US are actually the only ones who declare the military materials, but all of these are sort of aggregate materials quantities declarations. So those are the types of things that kind of build a little bit more confidence globally.
Okay.
So those are the areas that Pakistan can improve, and I think if you add all those up, you can see a possible score improvement of about 15 points just from those few areas.
Okay, very useful. Thank you so much, Samantha. Okay, in this part of the world, there is a common perception that we keep hearing about reports of some accidents and thefts in India, but we feel that the score, although Pakistan in this particular index has done somewhat better than India, but the assessment is not remarkably different. Although the assessment, the feeling in Pakistan is that the Indian program is much older, much bigger. They have a very large number of nuclear reactors and also some reported incidents. But do you think it's their assessment is fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the index looks at security of materials and nuclear facilities based on kind of national actions. So like I mentioned, laws and regulations and treaties. And so we're looking at the security conditions in a country, not security at specific facilities. And but the way an index methodology works is that you can't necessarily include everything that you think might be relevant. It has to be something you can measure through public sources, and you can measure it in a sort of objective way and apply the same criteria to every single country. And so that's why it's a very strict methodology, which is what makes it objective. But it doesn't include every possible criteria that one might consider. So we don't look at specific incidents. We have in the past thought about whether that's something you could include, but the thinking is you can't assess a whole country's security conditions by one event. And the lack of an event doesn't mean that you have great security either. So you can't really judge the country's preparedness by one single event.
Okay.
And India has a lot of the same areas of weakness as of Pakistan, with lower score in the security control. I'm looking at the India page right now. You can also see that on the website. But many of the same kind of areas of weakness of Pakistan, and Pakistan has clearly had this great trend of increasing its score in laws and regulations.
Okay. Well, Samantha, thank you so much for sparing time and joining us in Institute of Policy Studies today. I think our viewers have gained a lot of insight and understanding of how NTI works and what is its index about and how it is calculated. I think it was very useful conversation, and we'll continue to engage with you in future as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And again, I encourage people to visit the index website at www.ntiindex.org.
Thank you so much, and goodbye.